Are we ready to proceed?
Yeah, I think you're live right now.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Good afternoon to you all. Brilliant panel on this event today, as well as all our audience who are joining us either via YouTube or otherwise. And we are hoping to give you a very detailed analysis and full picture of what has been happening in Yemen during the past 6 years, what's happening right now, and what we hope to achieve in the next few weeks, few months, in order to bring an end to what has become known as the world's worst man-made humanitarian catastrophe. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this expression. It was coined by the United Nations itself, by the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. He came up with this expression. And that was only literally after 2 years of the start of the military campaign led by Saudi coalition against Yemen, which started in 2015. And today our title is more specifically focused on the closure of the airport in the capital Sana'a International Airport, which has been subjected to closure from around August 2016. That's about a year and a couple of months after the start of the Saudi-led military campaign against Yemen. By way of a quick reminder, the campaign itself, the military campaign against Yemen, was started on 25th March 2015 by a coalition led by Saudi Arabia, which included up to 17 countries. The military campaign was announced in Washington in the morning of 26th March 2015 by the then Foreign Minister Al-Zubaidi. And so this has been going on for now 6 years, and we are now coming up to the 7th year. There are a variety of international day of action in support of the people of Yemen. We are today going to hear about facts and figures surrounding the position of the airport and how it's having very, very bad impact on civilians on a very large scale. Quite frightening in terms of looking at the actual figures. We have limited the number of speakers today because we wanted our speakers to have ample opportunity to say everything they need to say, rather than having them rushed off after 7 minutes or 5 minutes of saying few things. There's a lot to say about what's happening in Yemen, and we've got impeccable speakers. As I have explained, we have the great Tara Raynor O'Grady from Ireland. We also have Brother Mohammed AlZubaidi from New York. I'm going to start introducing the speakers in details when I get to each speaker. And as a matter of housekeeping, and in order to make it easier for our audiences to follow the event and to have some facts and figures in front of them, I'm going to invite Mohammed AlZubaidi to be our first speaker, because Mohammed is going to give us statistics and detailed analysis of the figures relating to the impact of the closure of the airport in 2016. Mohammed AlZubaidi is originally from Yemen. He is from Ib. Ib is known as the green belt of Yemen. It's the most beautiful part of Yemen. It's a governor that is known for having the stepped farming system that goes back to thousands of years, ancient farming systems, which makes the whole place breathtakingly beautiful. And Mohammed is actually from that governorate. Mohammed is based in New York. He's a US citizen. He's a businessman, but he's also a political commentator and human rights activist. And he's never mean with his time, always willing and able and ready to give his time for any work relating to human rights campaigning. And I can't say any more than saying God bless you, and may God give us more good men like you, Brother Mohammed, and thank you for being with us today. And so please take the floor and give us the statistics about the Sana'a airport closure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here, first of all. And before I get to the results, I want to tell everybody the Sana'a International Airport, it has been closed since August 2016 by the Saudi Emirati Airlines that has been leading the war in Yemen for almost 6 years. And the closure of Sana'a International Airport actually has caused the death of 80,000 patients who could not travel to multiple countries to receive treatment outside Yemen. And there's more than 500,000 patients need to travel to receive treatment in multiple countries also. So Sana'a International Airport is a civil airport for more than 20 million Yemenis that live in 12 cities. And those the civilian citizens need to travel to receive multiple treatments in multiple countries and doing business in others. So according to the report of the Yemeni Ministry of Health for the year 2021, 37 patients are losing life on a daily basis, and there is more than 95,000 patients waiting for their known feed. And there is because of the continue of the closure of Sana'a International Airport. Also, the closure of Sana'a International Airport has created the worst catastrophe crisis. And according to the United Nations report for the last years, there are more than 7 million Yemenis already in the brink of starvation. The result of Sana'a International Airport of siege is more than 100,000 patients are dead. 80,000 patients need to travel to multiple countries for multiple treatments, most of them children. So you imagine how many children of those 80,000 patients. 50,000 citizens want to travel from Sana'a to other countries for businesses and others. And there is more than 45,000 citizens that are stuck outside Yemen, and they cannot go back because the siege of Sana'a International Airport, and most of them students out there. More than $48 million are the size of Sana'a International Airport losing due to the siege of Sana'a International Airport. So the situation is really painful and is big more than this result. This result is just for the last years and beginning this year's for 3 months until now. So they haven't updated any results of the last 3 months, but it's really bad situations due to the siege of Sana'a International Airport. So you can imagine how bad is the situation in reality, and this is just numbers, and it's really bad. What we see in the last result is really bad, and I think Ms. Kim have more to tell us about the result that we just talked about.
Thank you very much, Brother Mohammed. That's really helpful because we needed to have some numbers to work on for the rest of the event today so that we bear in mind exactly what we're dealing with. That's 500,000 people are affected by the closure of the airport because of their illnesses. Up to 90,000 people are at risk of dying. 80,000 have died. A lot of these are people with serious health conditions such as cancer, kidney problems, and many other problems that could have been dealt with had there not been also a blockade.
And most of the 80,000 scheme, most of the 80,000 patients that we talked about, that they need to travel to multiple countries to receive treatment. Most of them kids.
Yes.
So you imagine, like, kids need to travel. The clubs of health inside hospitals in Yemen makes it worse for children actually. So most of those 80,000 patients, is most of them children's and babies that need treatment.
Indeed. And what we have heard the last few days is that because of the illegal detention of cargo ships that carry oil derivatives that are required for operating the airport itself, is now causing or necessitating the closure of the airport itself finally, in the sense that at the moment there are at least 2 UN flights per day bringing in some essential supplies at least, and UN personnel and aid agencies coming and going with these 2 UN flights. So that itself will now not be possible to come in, and the airport will be like literally physically closed, bolted, correct?
Correct. Even the UN report that I checked out the last time, they was talking about blocking the ships from entering the seaports of Hodeidah is destroying the whole aspect of life in Yemen. So even the UN is talking about it, but we're just surprised that the UN is not doing any serious movement. I mean, to realize those ships, or to let them
Yes.
enter the countries.
Yes, it is. It's very interesting indeed that UN speaks about it now, after 6 years of the Human Rights Council reporting to the Security Council and everyone else that the blockade is illegal and is actually disrespect to the UN, its search mechanism scheme. You see, and I believe they are doing that now. Perhaps they are moved out of the really, really shocking humanitarian situation. Possible. We hope that. Or alternatively, they want to be seen to be doing something after so much outcry, after international movement, like the International Day of Action in January, which really brought out the real dire situation in Yemen by very, very formidable speakers worldwide who took part in this event, including Jeremy Corbyn, who said that this shouldn't be allowed to continue. So it could be that they may be wanting to be seen to be doing something, because quite a lot of the stuff that the UN does is rather irrational and incomprehensible. I'll be saying more about that later on, because it looks like I'm going to have to wear two hats today, the hat of a moderator and the hat of a speaker, because one of our speakers unfortunately contacted us today to say that he is very ill. He has hardly slept last night. He's got flu fever. He doesn't think it's COVID, but he has apologized at the last minute. Shabbir Hassan Ali, we wish you well, brother, and sorry that you couldn't join us today. So I'm going to be wearing another hat to say, to speak what he may have been saying in regards to this. I will be giving you some political background. There, I will be wearing my hat as the Yemen UN representative designate. But before I go into that level, I want to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is a delightful lady. These are my words. Her position as a professional is that her full name is Tara Raynor O'Grady. She is from Ireland. She's an international human rights defender based in Dublin. Her work centers on war, encouraging dialogue and de-escalation of violence. She lends her voice to strategic workshops and delivering panel debate to advocacy at the UN, appraising various governments and NGOs, coupled with grassroots support, documentation, and investigations in crisis zone. Tara has been familiar with the Yemen scenario and has been working with us throughout the Yemen military campaign. And she is an amazing lady. I take my hat off to her. We learn a lot from her, and we are grateful. One more thing I will say before I give the floor to Tara. She is not feeling very well, and despite her not feeling well with flu and cold and symptoms, she has made the effort to be here today in service to humanity. Now, I take my hats off to Tara, the real humanitarian human. May God increase people like you, Tara. Please take the floor.
Inshallah. Shukran. Bismillah. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm greatly disturbed by what is continuing to happen in Yemen and offer my condolences for the loss of so much. Your loved ones, your lands, your livelihoods, your collective loss that is becoming known as the greatest stain on humanity of this century. Where is the rationale to this bloodletting, which as of next week on 25th of March will mark 7 years of this hellish situation for Yemen's people? What is the purpose of the siege? Even the airports and seaports are under the control of the so-called legitimate government. So what is it exactly that they want control of now? Yemen is arguably the most impoverished country in the region, yet there are resources in the north. And so it is a geographical advantage for access for the transport of oil. We have more questions than answers here because there simply does not seem to be any logic for this heinous hemorrhaging of human life to be permitted to continue without end in sight. Is it the sustained military onslaught? Is it just to put practical use to the bullets, bombs, and intelligence that they are trading, and which certainly yields continued profit to the international arms trade? Or is it a massive, concentrated posturing against Iran? I've not heard that Yemenis want an absentee landlord. However, I have heard them declare their desire for independence and autonomous rule. This is internal to Yemen and not predicated by Iran. Has it now become a war of attrition, where there is now no conceivable value for life or discernment of human rights to be respected in any fundamental form? Is it to weaken the Houthis? Now the Houthis have become stronger and continue to grow in strength and power. And so why is the siege continuing? People are indeed dying from malnutrition, disease, and because they do not have access to medicine or healthcare, nor now the ability to travel at all for medical care, even for normal needs associated with the human condition. Why are the Saudi American coalition continuing the campaign of killing in Yemen? Well, we know that they are broadly the sponsors of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Daesh, and the various extremist militant groups, after all. So I asked a number of Yemeni colleagues in recent days, and they tell me that it appears that it is to kill as many Yemeni people as they can. How horrific to reach that conclusion. It is the greatest despair. What hope is there then for them, for ourselves, or for our children? This is more troubling to me than anything else because it amounts to what I have witnessed in many other areas of concern. And while I do hesitate to say it, it does appear to be a push for Shia genocide. With all hope, I will continue to try to raise awareness for the Yemeni community inside and around the world, and to encourage for recognition of the National Salvation Government, who are operating under the existing constitution. Can I add that this government includes all political parties of Yemen, including Ansarallah, the People's Congress Party, the Communist Party, and many others. It has a president, a prime minister, and all other constitutional ministerial posts. And if this were internationally recognized and afforded the respect that it is deserving, then I believe that diplomatic talks can be practical in bringing an end to the siege on Yemen. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much, Tara. That's absolutely amazing comments to hear coming from you. And I have no doubt in my mind that with the presence of people like you, the world is still safe, even if we are a minority. As you know, historically, Ireland itself has been subjected to an imperial rule of using hunger as a weapon of war. And Ireland survived that. And now it's Yemen's turn, because this matter of starving people and using hunger as a weapon of war is an old British colonial system. And indeed, I'm sure you're familiar with it. And, you know, you can share with us how the Irish people overcame this problem and managed to survive despite all of that, and managed to get their independence, albeit with still outstanding issue of the border in the sea. Let's call it the border in the sea. Yeah. So we have a lot in common with you, our brothers and sisters in Ireland, and we are delighted to know that Ireland is now a member of the Security Council. And Ireland has also achieved praises from many countries as excelling in the art of diplomacy. And we're very pleased about that. And to hear you say that Sana'a government and describing it with all its components in the way you did makes a big difference to the people of Yemen in particular, because at the moment, for 6 years, the thing that the world has been hearing about describing the government of Sana'a is Houthi rebels, Houthi militias, and so on. I'll be saying some things about that, but if you have any further comments to give us about ways of overcoming this policy of use of hunger as a weapon of war, and in particular what we can do in relation to getting this airport to open for civilians, bearing in mind the number of people whose lives are threatened and the number of people who have already been destroyed And so if you could share with us any further comments you may have about these specific issues, Tara.
Kim, I think it's really important. The work that you're doing yourself, I have to say, is really critically important with the United Nations. And yes, I do feel that it is as a result of much lobbying and advocacy that the United Nations have now been outspoken after so many years. And it is with dismay that I noticed that they were so relaxed in doing so for so long. Ireland's situation, as you rightly said, is one that's ongoing. Our country is still split. And now with Brexit, we, between the Europeans broadly on the continent and Great Britain as an island, we have a fear here that we're going to be left as roadkill between the EU and the UK over the border in Northern Ireland. And all of these problems that we are facing with vaccines and the current pandemic crisis. But the issue of, first of all, remember that after 800 years, I'm speaking English, as I had mentioned to your colleague earlier who spoke to me in German. We have to speak many languages in Ireland because of the nature of what happened to us. They took our language, our heritage. We weren't allowed to wear green. That's why St. Patrick's Day is important to us, because we show our Irishness. And our religion was taken away. So many things that were removed from us that countries take for granted. And as a result of that, we stand strongly in solidarity with countries who are emerging, seeking their rights for self-determination. And I feel that the government in Sana'a is absolutely a legitimate government. They've proved themselves to be, but they are in a war. So one cannot look at the government in Sana'a and compare it to a government in a country that is not at war, like the Dutch government or the Swedish government or the Spanish government, because they can't operate as a normal government in this time of terrible crisis. They are definitely doing their best, and they are recognized certainly by the people in the region and those of us who outside who have taken the time to see that they are working under the Constitution and that the government encompasses all of the different political parties with agency within the government. And so I think, Kim, it's very important with your work to continue giving that message and delivering that message to international governments, continuing to raise awareness for that, both with the United Nations and with those NGOs that are very powerful, like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights First, and all of the etceteras. And indeed with the International Labour Organization, who needs to see the value of the youth in Yemen, how much that they have to give to the region, the wealth that is within the Yemeni people themselves, and to continue to nurture and encourage the culture of the people in Yemen, because Yemen is a country to be proud of. And there is so much that the Yemeni people, after this terrible experience that they are enduring now, can do to help forge ways for peace in the region. And I really see that they need to be included in any decisions that are made about their country, for their country, and locally geopolitically. So I just applaud your work, Kim, and all power to you in it.
Thank you very much, Tara. That's lovely to hear from you, and it's very important that we have people like you on board saying these things, because here I am, from Yemeni originally, and if I'm speaking about what's happening there, automatically I am labeled a Houthi rebel, and notwithstanding the fact that I am originally from the south, not the north, and I come from the tribe of Al-Alawi. And so, the lies and distortions tend to weigh more heavily on the conscience and operations and minds of people. One of the most difficult things that we are having to face is the colonization of the mind, which is much more serious than colonization of the land, because with the land you can free it by resisting physically and getting rid of the colonialist. But when the mind is colonized, that is much more difficult to overcome. As you have explained, as you see how the English language has taken over, possibly Protestantism, whereas Ireland is historically Catholic. And we have the British rule taking over, and people, this is what is being designed for Yemen as well. And I'll come to that in a bit when I explain all of that. And of course, the legitimate government of Yemen is the government in Sana'a, and that is according to international customary law. Everyone knows that, but no one speaks about it. In terms of going to the UN to speak, as the Yemen representative designate, I ought to be able to access the UN Security Council, even if only as an interested party or a commentator. They can call me what they wish, so that I can give the rest of the members the true picture of what's happening in Yemen, rather than these polished reports that the envoy comes and delivers. I am about to also, when I come to speak about, when I wear my speaker's hat, I will come and explain some of the recent developments at the UN Security Council. Apart from the human rights via NGOs, as you have rightly explained, there really isn't much scope for Yemenis voices to be heard, and the Yemenis voices, and I'm speaking here not just of the government of Sana'a, I'm speaking here about the millions of the people who come to the streets of Sana'a to show support to the government of Sana'a. Millions, not one or two. Up to 14 governors came out on the International Day of Action for Yemen on 25th January. The photos were overwhelming, quite often brings tears to my eyes. I say, this is democracy in action. Whereas here in the UK, the last thing that's been happening is, after they have, literally destroyed our civil liberties over the alleged fight on terrorism, we now discover that they want to ban demonstrations as well, because they are apparently too noisy. You know what happened to the vigil to Sarah, the late Sarah, her murder case, and what happened with police Kalash. So they don't want democracy in the same way that they don't want it here. They don't want it elsewhere either. They just want control with an iron fist. It doesn't matter who dies, who gets destroyed, what goes. There's in addition to the murder that is broad daylight murdering of people on a mass scale happening in Yemen every day, whether by blockade or by the direct airstrikes that often target civilian places. There is murder of Yemeni culture. There is theft of Yemeni artifacts going back thousands of years. All that Sabayan is in reference to Queen Sheba. Sheba is called in Arabic Saba, and her kingdom of Saba, and all that artifact going back thousands of years have been stolen. Much like the Egyptian mummies that found their way into British Museum. We are very concerned about that cultural rape as well. The airstrike on old Sana'a town was a deliberate act of trying to wipe out the culture of the people of Yemen. And so there is, I regret to use this term, there is a rape going on here of the sovereignty of the state of Yemen on many levels, and which is very worrying. And going back to Brother Mohammed AlZubaidi, you've told us the harrowing figures and the horrors of closure of the airport and the impact of it on civilians in particular. What are the other alternatives available to people to travel? Aren't they saying that the southern governors, for example, are free, and aren't people able to travel via Aden Airport? Can you tell us what happens if people try to travel?
It just making it worse for citizens to travel all the way from Sana'a to city of Aden, which is about 75. I think 75. I think is around that, like 75,000 kilometers from Sana'a all the way to Aden, which is really far away, and citizens that travel all the way from the city of Sana'a all the way to Aden is really far away. It takes them almost 22 hours to get to Aden city, because of traveling there, and there is a lot of blockade and the ways there to get to Aden. There is another airport, which is Sayon Airport, but some of the part of Sayon is controlled by ISIS and Cairo. So a lot of people not traveling from Sayon or from Hadramaut because of the, they get worried about being in the places on the side where is ISIS, in Cairo. But it's really bad. It's really bad, like traveling to a lot of like the population, the biggest population of Yemeni people is in the cities or the north cities, where is Sana'a International Airport is the closer airport to them, and those people is the biggest population from the Yemeni populations in Yemen.
It is very sad. I have to say that I agree with you. There are great many dangers. In fact, UN agencies themselves have been offered the possibility of traveling on land from Sana'a
even the
to
UN
Aden.
report, Muskim, the last time when the UN report, I mean the UN agents, they cannot even travel to Aden airport because they know it's not safe. That's why you've seen all the time the UN agents, they come to Sana'a airport when they want to come to Yemen or enter Yemen. They never travel to Aden airport because they know is not ready and is not safe with all this militia that Saudi Arabia is having in Aden and Emirates and all that. And you know,
indeed,
yes.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I have actually a case that was reported to me in my capacity as the Foreign Relations Officer for the South Peace and Conciliation Association, whereby a bus load of people traveling into Aden, militias, armed militias who are part of the Al-Zubaidi militia people, stopped this bus, took out a young lady in her 20s in front of everybody. Nobody could stop them. Nobody could do anything. They dragged her by force. They took her into a lay-by. They raped her. They murdered her. And then they dumped her body in the lay-by there. And they just moved on. No one could do anything with them. They are armed with machine guns. And anyone who tries to speak is instantly shot. So UN agencies do know about the reality of these dangerous situations. Nevertheless, they speak about the Southern Transitional Council as if it were an official body or governmental representatives of the South that could be trusted to be a party to any dialogue. This is the reality of the Southern Transitional Council. I am personally working on a number of cases where they have just taken a lot of young men into custody for no reason, sometimes because their surnames sound Hashemite. So they got arrested. They're racists. They're racist. They are committing ethnic cleansing, literally, of a particular tribe. They are sending their terrorists to go to Hadramaut. One member of my own tribe, an imam of a mosque, a Sufi man. The two of the Al-Zubaidi militias came there, knocked on the mosque, and asked him to give them a fatwa. He said to them, "Give me 2 minutes. I'll pray 2 units to come back and give you the fatwa." And he went in and he prayed his 2 units. He came out. As he was praying, they just opened a hail of bullets on him from their machine guns. This was from Al-Aidaru's family. And he's a member of my tribe. He's like a grandfather for me. This happened about a year ago. And this is the reality of the South, that they are calling the freed parts. Freed from whom? From Yemenis, handed to whom? To occupiers, Janjaweeds, Emiratis, British and American personnel who now have bases at Al-Muhra airport, where they are recruiting and training spies to work for them, to go to Sana'a and give them civilian targets for Saudi coalition to come and bomb. Recently, the Sana'a authorities have broken a spy ring, which was led by, about 5-6 men were recruited by American CIA men, and then they were passed on to the British personnel. Both of them apparently have bases at Al-Muhra airport. This came out from the confessions of these spies who were arrested by Sana'a authorities, and they are in custody right now. And their statements, detailed statements of how they were recruited, how they were trained, where are these bases, what were the names of the men who were training them, were all given in a televised by Al Masira confession event. So there is clearly colonization going on, and the so-called freed parts are absolutely not free. Even the Southerners, my own family, and a whole lot of other Southerners have had to leave the South, and they are IDPs in Sana'a under Sana'a government protection, and they live freely there. They are respected with dignity. They live there with their dignity. There is no sectarianism there. You can be whoever you want to be, Hashemite, non-Hashemite, You can be. I have Salafi brothers who have toned down their Salafism last couple of years simply because they were IDPs under Sana'a government control. And they are now coexisting with the rest of the Zaydis and the Shabbir, much like it was Yemen before the advent of Saudi Wahhabism into Yemen. Yeah. And so these are very serious issues. So, Tara, do you have any comments on these issues that I have just said? I'm sure you heard they are claiming that the South is freed, but the reality of the South is like this.
No, I did actually want to ask you about the role of the Janjaweeds in the South, and also about the situation just for women in general, how they're treated in the South.
Yes, women are on a daily basis literally kidnapped, raped, just like I've explained the case of this young lady. I haven't got the actual report in front of me to give you her full name, but I have commented on that through the organization Human Rights for Yemen in Twitter. The video on the details of what happened to her is in Twitter, because we want the world to know what's happening in the so-called freed South. And every other day I get a report about a young woman being raped by one of the Janjaweed forces. If it's not the Janjaweed forces, then it's these militias, freaks who are so-called forces of Al-Zubaidi and the Southern Transitional Council. Southern Transitional Council is having a voice here and a voice there. He is just totally rejected. He's unaccepted. He is treated by majority of the Southerners.
It's actually like 10 report last year's scheme. 10 report last years of the UN talking about kidnaps, like women kidnaps and rapes from soldiers, like Emirati soldiers in Aden. And that's the UN report was talking about last year's tens of situations like that that happen in the city of Aden.
Indeed, indeed. And there are also these so-called secret detention centers, which Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and others have reported about. In these detention centers, not only women get raped, but men get raped. Men get raped with batons. And so that is the reality of Southern governors, who majority of people are totally against it. But there is such a nasty repression going on. It makes you breathless with shock. That's how I can describe what happens to me every day. Sometimes I have to do breathing exercises before I continue reading some of the reports that I receive from the South. And some of the women are also kidnapped and sold on, trafficked to Emirati forces to be used as prostitutes. And sometimes they are taken on to other countries, other places. Socotra Island is totally occupied, and there is military bases being built there in favor of the Americans, they say. There's also Miyun Island, which is also subjected to the same horrific situation. And as I've said, Al-Mahra is also occupied. Al-Mahra, there was never any Houthi anywhere in these parts, by the way. For them to be there is clearly evidence of attempt to colonize Yemen. That's what this whole action is about. No matter what dressing up they give it, no matter what they say, it's all a lie.
About the absentee landlord, the allegedly legitimate government that's outside living in hotels. I actually can't get my head around how a government can legitimize itself when it's administering a country remotely from hotels. Do I sound crazy when I say that?
No,
because I cannot get my head around it. How are they managing to maintain their legitimacy at all? How? I mean, it just absolutely beggars belief that a government of a country can live outside of the country for 7 years and claim to be legitimate and do everything from their hotel. How is that working?
Let me put on my speaker's hat now, so I'll go and explain the background to this. This is also relevant right now because there has been a couple of
his hotel, president of a hotel. Wow.
So president of the hotel.
Facebook government. They are called Facebook government.
Facebook government.
Yeah. So I'm wearing my speaker hat, and what has happened recently, starting with most recent event, because that is relevant and that also explains your question, Tara. Mr. Griffith, who is the envoy to Yemen, or UN envoy to Yemen, who has a lot to learn about objectivity and doing this job properly with the greatest respect. The man is totally out of his depth, and accusations are abound that he is the product of colonial Britain. He was born in Aden, and he lived there for a good few years of his life, so he must have a memory of the Earl Grey tea time in Aden and places like that. So he sounds like, majority of Yemenis say this man is clearly helping the colonialists to get Yemen back into British colony. And he's not doing his job as he's supposed to, as an independent, objective man, delivering accurate reports to the UN Security Council so that the rest of the countries can do their job under the UN Charter, because Yemen is a member of the United Nations. It has every privilege and advantage and right guaranteed by the Charter. Now, let's start by one of the most despicable lies that this man tells the UN Security Council. Let's start with lie number 1. That Saudi-led coalition's military campaign is continuing, and that there is a need to comply with the UN Security Council resolution 2216. Now, resolution 2216 was passed some 3 weeks after the start of the Saudi-led aggression on Yemen. It was passed sometime on the 27th or thereabout of April 2015. The Saudi-led campaign started on the 25th of March 2015. So you cannot retrospectively give authority to an act of war. This is an act of war. Military action must be expressed in clear words by any UN Security Council resolution that authorizes use of any force against any country. It must be expressly stated, rule number 1. So this resolution 2216 is therefore a failure. He can't use it to justify the military campaign against Yemen. Rule number 2, the resolution itself is in relation to a number of named individuals, not the whole of Yemen. So the Saudi-led coalition cannot justify the blockade against Yemen by reference to resolution 2216, because 2216 only affects few named people. Ansarallah, one of those people who are named under the resolution, is now dead, former President Ali Abdullah Saleh. So for this grown-up man, I mean, I'm feeling very strangely odd, because I think he's a fellow British man. He's a professional man. I think he ought to preserve his integrity a little. For him to sit in the Security Council in front of all these grown-up people and refer to resolution 2216 is not a laughing matter. I would have laughed otherwise, but it's not a laughing matter, because the consequences of referring to this misleadingly in this way has been creation and maintenance of the worst man-made humanitarian catastrophe on earth. Nearly 500,000 people have already been dead because of this illegal military campaign against Yemen by Saudi-led coalition, which campaign, by the way, was announced in Washington, as I said earlier. So who is the real party here who's fighting Yemen, which will become apparent after we take into account also references to military bases in Socotra Island, in Mayoun Island, in the Anad in the south, in Aden, also in Al-Muhra. You have to, really go behind the lines here and find out who has vested interest in this military campaign in Yemen, notwithstanding the fact that they have these proxies as their puppets to do their work. They're supplying the weapons, they're supplying the intelligence, they're supplying the logistics, they're supplying personnel, they're just supplying unlimitedly all kinds of things to just go on this murder rampage against the people of Yemen. So here is one serious issue with Mr. Griffith, with the greatest respect. He's lying to the Security Council when he refers to 2216, because it's useless. It doesn't authorize use of force. It only relates to few named people. And finally, about 2216, it was passed illegally because Russia abstained. When it was the passage of this resolution, Russia abstained. And as Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council, Russian vote is essential for the passage of such instrument. Its absence makes the instrument illegal. And I have that in a written legal opinion from a highly experienced, qualified barrister of international law. So I'm repeating my barrister's advice on this matter, and I can assure you that this instrument is therefore illegal. For Mr. Griffith, therefore, to sit there and refer to it as justification for murdering Yemenis with impunity is just disgusting, to say the least. So now let's go on to Mr. Hadi and the government of Facebook and where they may get legitimacy or illegitimacy. The Gulf Initiative was passed or signed in 2012 as a transitional period for a period of 2 years, and Hadi was chosen by all the parties involved in the Yemen revolution of 2011. This is to avoid bloodshed. They agreed on Hadi for a transitional period of 2 years from February 2012.
I remember that.
February 2014, that instrument, the Gulf Initiative, came to an end along with Mr. Hadi's term. So to say the internationally recognized government, that is a term that does not exist under international law. I've checked and double checked with great many highly experienced international lawyers, and all agree with me. There is no such thing. This concept is very similar to the concept of liberal intervention of the 90s, where they went and rummaged in other countries, and when it started to become, unwelcome by people in the world, they then started using sexed up documents, as happened in Iraq, as you remember. The documents had to be sexed up. Now, in relation to Yemen, they claim that Hadi had requested Saudi coalition intervention. That's another lie. That's a lie. Hadi knew his term had ended. Now, the parties who were involved in the Yemen revolution of 2011 came back to Sana'a, and they asked him to effect an orderly transition from him to another party. At that point in early 2015, he carried on. Even though his term had ended, he carried on for a few months. But by September that year, September 2014, the party said, no, now you haven't complied with any of the terms of the Gulf Initiative. You're going to have to now effect an orderly transition from you into, as there was the national dialogue, and people have come into the peace and cooperation agreement and peace and partnership agreement. That instrument was signed, again, to avoid bloodshed. But what Hadi did was, it looked like he had already been in agreement or in cahoot with the Saudi coalition and the Western backers, and the plan to attack Yemen was already in place, notwithstanding all these efforts to avoid bloodshed by the other parties. And so Hadi refused to effect an orderly transition. What he did was he just escaped dressed up in women's clothing. But today we hear people allied to the Islah party saying that Houthis are mistreating. By the way, when they say Houthis, they are referring to Sana'a government. Everybody who is against the Saudi-led aggression on Yemen is automatically also referred to Houthi. I wouldn't be surprised, Tara, if they start referring to you as Houthi also in the next few days in their media. So this man has his term had so UN is lying, its envoy is lying, Saudi coalition is lying, and I have the evidence to back what I am saying. Have a look at clause 7 of the Gulf Initiative to see that Mr. Hadi's term had ended, and at that stage, September 2014, he had no legitimacy for him to request UN intervention or Saudi-led coalition intervention. He had no leg to stand. His legitimacy had ended. And under international customary law, whoever gets control of the capital, which in this case is Sana'a government, becomes the government of the country to run the constitution, because there can be no political or administrative vacuum in any country. As you can imagine, that would be a chaos, which is what they designed for Yemen. Now, going back in time in history, a few years ago, when Saleh was still a president, the US administration ordered Saleh to destroy all of Yemen's air defenses. This is a long time ago. Question is, before the revolution of Yemen, this is, why are you asking Yemen to destroy its air defenses unless you already had a plan to invade Yemen, but you didn't want to face problems as you did in Vietnam or Iraq or even Afghanistan? This time you're now using proxies, which is why I have come to the conclusion that modern day imperial wars are conducted by proxies, and the proxies themselves have multi-layers. So you have the primary layer, which is in this case in relation to Yemen, Saudi-led coalition, and you have a secondary layer, and the secondary layer is the Yemeni mercenaries who are purchased with money. And you have a fourth layer, and the fourth layer is the terror militias like Aqab and Daesh, who 2 weeks ago have made a public declaration that they are working as ground forces for Saudi-led coalition in Marib in particular, in Al-Baida and Taiz. And all these frontiers are now heated up like unspeakably. We had a televised interview with the national team of negotiators, Mr. Mohammed Abdul Salam, on Al Jazeera. And that interview was absolutely brilliant because it gives the whole background of the Yemenis' position about this whole affair. And these people don't lie, as I wouldn't want to lie, because I wouldn't say anything unless I had evidence to back what I was saying. I'm telling you, the UN and all these people are lying, and they had this plan to invade Yemen much earlier. They're using old colonial imperial policies of using hunger as a weapon of war. They can't now offer us any suggestions of peace because they are not in a position. They have conflict of interest. They are principal participants in this genocide against Yemen. So they can't play the good cop now, like, you know, we're offering peace. No, they're not. As far as Abdul Salam is concerned, the Al Jazeera interviewer put this question to him. He said to him, why are you blockading Taiz? I have to say, I nearly fell off my chair with laughter because, like, okay, is there a blockade on Taiz only? And of course, Mohammed Abdul Salam had this brilliant reply. He said to him, have you not seen that the whole country is blockaded by air, by sea, by land? And you can only refer to, and you think, are you mad? Why would we want to starve our own people when we are committing all these sacrifices to protect them from imperial plans to enslave them? And so that was a brilliant reply. Another matter that I will refer to is the press conference of Mr. Hussein Al-Izzi, who is the Deputy Foreign Minister. Mr. Al-Izzi gave detailed explanation of the despicable position of the UN envoy by way of misleading the world and the UN Security Council itself, and this anomaly of not allowing us to have right to be heard. All that is being heard is this propaganda, lies, and distortion, and war machines being driven, and profits of the weapon sellers being looked at more favorably than the millions of lives that are being put at risk. And I have gone on a little longer than I had hoped, but I can tell you that in Marib, in Taiz, in Al-Baida, and all these parts that are occupied by Islah Party, Muslim Brotherhood of Yemen Party, allied forces, are none other than Aqab and Daesh. They have officially came out declaring that they are ground forces for these people. So my question to the international community, to the Security Council, to everyone else is, are you fighting terrorism or are you aiding and abetting terrorism? What are you really doing? You've taken our liberties here in the UK during the last 20 years. Everything has been lost. And now it turns out you're aiding and abetting regimes that are using these evildoers as proxies in Yemen. So the emperor seems to be naked, in my view, at the moment, and it's very embarrassing, to say the least. Thank you very much, and I welcome any comments from you, Sister Tara and Brother Mohammed.
there's just one thing that I would like to mention that I've noticed in the last few weeks myself. I do a lot of work on the Gulf states, and recently the European Parliament made an agreement with the regime in Bahrain for trade. Ostensibly, it's trade and economics and sharing of resources and all that kind of thing. Now, for the last 10 years, we have been trying to draw attention to the ongoing human rights crisis in Bahrain. But because the US and the UK both have naval bases there, it's impossible to move the situation. However, once we heard recently that the regime had sent their stooges to Europe and were courting and lobbying and hand massaging to build their alliances in Europe, we realized that this, we were talking earlier about democracy in Europe and the stifling of freedoms, and particularly in the UK in recent days, the lack of ability for freedom of expression, and how Dominic Raab has said that he will do business with countries who don't have good reputations with human rights. But this general feeling that our politicians don't hear us and don't listen to us, one thing gave me a little bit of hope, and it was that after all of this economic massaging in Europe was going on, we contacted the European External Action Service and personally contacted hundreds of MEPs to bring them up to date on the situation in Bahrain that they may not have heard since the 10 years ago. Bearing in mind that everybody has a full agenda, everyone's living under pandemic situations, everybody's looking at Yemen, everyone's looking at Syria, there are many, many things. But we managed to convince them, and last Thursday, I think it was on Thursday, they made an absolutely landslide resolution on Bahrain and condemned 633 votes condemning the regime in Bahrain. And to me, that really showed that the European Parliament are listening when we managed to get their ear, which is no easy feat in itself. But because the UK and the US are taking the positions that they have taken with Saudi Arabia, and to my mind, just because the Biden administration says something doesn't mean that it will come into effect. And we have to look to them, but we don't have to be beholden to them, nor beholden to the UK. We can approach Europe as in its own right, and Europe can be both outspoken and in practical terms can assist. So I really think that perhaps some efforts need to be refocused on Europe and those larger, more powerful countries, and indeed countries like Ireland. We have the smaller Nordic blocs as well that Ireland has good, strong alliance with. And I just think that there are advantages at the moment that we can take with regards to international diplomacy, where we can apply the necessary pressure to encourage Europe, I'm being very careful of my words, to encourage Europe to be outspoken and to express both their concern for what's happening in Yemen, but also to urge them to be outspoken about the legitimacy of the National Salvation Government.
Indeed, that is a very helpful comment from you, Tara. Thank you. In solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Bahrain, I was very pleased to see the European decision. Indeed, myself, I've been following this stuff. And as far as I can see, and as I have said earlier, there is multi-layered level of colonization by proxies these days.
Absolutely.
I do not regard Bahrain as an independent nation, as it seems to the international world, to the people of the world. Bahrain, these guys who are in control of Bahrain, so-called the Al Khalifa rulers, they are not independent, sovereign people government in the sense of the word. Yep. They are abusing their people in ways that is so hard to even describe. I mean, I've just seen a video of one of the victims of torture last couple of weeks. His skull was broken, but his skin was not cut. Can you imagine? skull has been smashed, but the skin was not broken.
You know, they send them to Ireland, to Northern Ireland, to do training for torture here in Northern Ireland. And that absolutely blows my mind. It's the British prison system of Her Majesty's Prison Service in Northern Ireland, but that's my country that they are sending people to teach them how to torture people in other countries based on what they learned in Ireland and the Congo, and what the British military learned in Ireland through torturing people here in my country. And they're exporting that as intelligence to other countries. It makes me absolutely sick.
Which is precisely my point, Tara. Bahrain has never been given its independence. Bahrain was and remains under British rule. Let's not pretend otherwise. No, John Yates, one of our own Scotland Yard officers, is out there teaching people how to torture. What is he doing there, training these people how to torture? There is genocide going on silently in Bahrain, whereby they are displacing native Bahrainis and kicking them out of their country and taking away their citizenship, replacing them with mercenary soldiers that they purchased from Asian countries who don't even speak Arabic properly. In addition to the British occupation, like I said, Bahrain never got its independence. That's my view. I've analyzed the situation. I don't see Bahrain as an independent nation. And that's why we need to change our language in terms of requiring independence for Bahrain anew from the same rulers, because perhaps they're not controlling it, colonizing it directly as it was during the old days, the East India Company, but it's being done by proxies today, and the proxies in the region are the Saudi regime and the Emirati regime. They moved into Bahrain in 2011. They've been committing untold horrors there. So Al Khalifa are not rulers. Al Khalifa are just a mafia group who are just like, used as a cardboard image, if you like, of rulers to make people think that this is an independent country with rulers. No, Bahrain needs to be freed from colonization and its proxies.
Bearing in mind that we are looking at this through a prism of multinationalism, so we're seeing how this directly relates with Yemen when these colonial powers are bolstering and encouraging these regimes. And it is absolutely unconscionable that this is continuing to happen with monarchies and colonizers around the world. So, really, Kim, the work is cut out for us, but I'm determined to continue to raise awareness about this, particularly for Yemen. The people who are in Yemen, the majority of people will not see this broadcast today. They won't even hear about this broadcast today. But please God, there will be some resonance somehow from this, that there can be some encouragement and some hope offered to some people who will see this, because there's a lot of solidarity outside, and the oral solidarity that we have does not translate on the ground. It is insufficient for us to just talk. We have to act and give our energy to lobbying in the halls of power where we can, and in whatever way we can.
Indeed, and it's always been a delightful experience working with you. I am with you there. As you know, we have been doing back room work here and there, and we shall continue our efforts in that regard. And I'm grateful for your help and support for us in Yemen. And on behalf of the people of Yemenis, I thank you with all my heart for all your hard work in supporting us and also supporting our brothers in Bahrain. And like you quite rightly said, the Yemeni resistance based in the led by the Sana'a government is exactly about that, refusing colonization directly or by proxy. That's what we're about. Yeah. And I unless anyone has any more questions, I think I have taken enough of your time today, and I am most grateful for your input. You may be surprised, Tara. A lot of the Yemenis will see this. I'm pretty confident they will see it, as we have distributed our invite to them. And in terms of other activities, there are a great many activities at an International Day of Action for Yemen in the US on the 25th, in the UK on the 25th. On the 26th in Germany, and all of that will be posted and updated in various means. There will be also an online event such as this one on Thursday next week in support of Yemen, commemorating the 6th anniversary of the conflict. So we are hoping that our audience can join us and support us in this action. I will communicate with you in private about detailed plans about what we're doing next week in support of the people of Yemen, in solidarity for all oppressed peoples of the world, to our brothers in Ireland, to to our brothers and sisters in Bahrain, in Lebanon, in Syria and Libya and elsewhere. I give you my love and support, and we hope, inshallah, we will win. We will win at the end of the day. We will win. Thank you very much.
Indeed, Kim. God bless you all.
We will.
Thank you.
Long live Yemen.
Long live Yemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you for your support.